Tonight there is no need to improve anything. You may notice that words feel heavy, not the words on a screen, but the ones that speak quietly inside, the ones that comment, the ones that judge, the ones that replay the day again and again. If that is happening, nothing has gone wrong. This is simply what the mind does when it has been carrying too much. You do not need to stop those words. You do not need to replace them, and you do not need to make them kinder. For now, you can let them exist without responding. There is no task here, no lesson to understand, no effort required, just this moment as it is. Perhaps the body is already resting while the mind is still standing, still alert, still speaking. That is allowed. You are not late, you are not behind, and nothing needs to catch up. The night does not ask you to explain yourself. You may notice the breath without changing it. The body knows how to breathe without instruction. Inhaling, exhaling, words may continue to appear, short ones, long ones, fragments without shape. There is no need to listen closely. You can let them pass the way distant sounds pass outside a window, heard but not followed. Nothing in you needs to be fixed before rest can begin. You do not have to understand why the inner voice sounds the way it does. You do not have to trace it back to the past. For now, there is no past to revisit and no future to prepare, only this quiet place where you are allowed to pause. If the mind wants to speak, let it speak softly. If it grows tired of speaking, let that happen too. There is no correct pace. The night is long, and you do not need to hurry toward sleep. Simply being here is enough. As the night continues, you may notice something subtle beginning to shift. The mind is still awake, but it is no longer leaning forward. It does not need to reach. It does not need to grasp. Words still appear, yet they arrive with less urgency. Good, bad, right, wrong. They may pass through awareness, but they do not need to stay. You do not have to choose between them. You do not have to agree or disagree. For now, they can move on their own, like clouds that form and dissolve without asking permission. There is no need to review the day, no need to sort moments into success or failure. The night does not ask for an evaluation. You are not being measured here. The body understands this instinctively. It settles without commentary. Muscles soften without instruction. The jaw loosens. The hands rest. The body does not wonder if it is resting correctly. It simply rests when it is allowed to. Breathing continues, steady and unforced. In, out. Nothing extra is required. Thoughts may still speak. Some may sound familiar. Some may repeat themselves. You do not need to interrupt them. You do not need to answer. They are not asking a question. If a thought arises that says, "This should be different," notice how quickly it fades when it is not engaged. If another one says, "This is not enough," you can let it pass as well. There is no need to defend yourself. There is nothing to prove. Here, you are not expected to improve. You are not practicing calm. You are not training the mind. This is not effort. This is release. Language begins to lose its sharpness. Sentences arrive unfinished. Some words appear without meaning. Others dissolve before they complete themselves. That is not a problem. Clarity is not required tonight. understanding can rest. The mind does not need to know what comes next. Rest does not arrive through explanation. It arrives when explanation is no longer needed. You may notice small pauses between thoughts, brief spaces where nothing is being said. If that happens, there is no need to fill the space. Silence does not need company, and if words return softly, that is fine too. They are welcome to come and go. There is no correct rhythm, no pace to follow. The night unfolds at its own speed. You are not late, you are not early. You are exactly where the night allows you to be. Here, nothing is being judged, not the thoughts that pass through, not the body as it rests, not the way this moment feels. Everything can remain as it is, loosening, unfolding, without being named, without being fixed, without being improved. And now, without forcing it, you may notice that the inner voice begins to change in volume, not because you made it quieter and not because you found the right words. It simply becomes less urgent when it is no longer being answered. The mind can speak for a long time when it believes it must be heard, but when nothing is demanded of it, it often grows tired, not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, as if the effort of speaking begins to feel unnecessary. You may still hear phrases forming inside, a small sentence beginning, then pausing, a thought that almost becomes an opinion, then fades. You might notice how many thoughts are shaped like judgments, even when they do not feel like judgments at first. A tone of approval, a tone of disappointment, a tone of comparison. The mind is used to arranging life into categories, and it will try to do that even in the dark, even in bed, even when the body is asking for rest. But tonight, you do not have to cooperate with that habit. You do not have to correct it either. You can simply let it continue gently until it naturally slows. It may help to remember that the mind's voice is not always you. It is a function like breathing is a function. It is a pattern like the heart's rhythm is a pattern. The mind produces language the way the body produces warmth. It does not mean anything is wrong. It does not mean you have failed to relax. It does not mean you are doing sleep incorrectly. It only means that the mind has practiced speaking for many years, and it does not stop immediately simply because the room is quiet. So you can let it be there without turning toward it. You can let the inner voice become one more sound in the background, like a distant street, like wind moving through leaves, like water traveling through pipes, present but not personal, present but not demanding, present but not central. And as you lie there, you might notice how the body does not speak in words. The body speaks in sensations, weight, temperature, pressure, softness, the touch of fabric, the contact of the pillow, the way gravity holds you without effort. The body does not say good or bad. It does not describe itself as enough or not enough. The body simply feels what it feels and then changes slowly as time passes. You may notice the place where the breath begins, not as an instruction but as a simple fact. The breath arrives, the breath leaves. Sometimes it is deeper, sometimes it is light, sometimes it pauses slightly and then continues. It is not trying to be perfect. It is not trying to be calm. It is only doing what it does. And when you begin to notice the breath in this way, the inner voice often loses interest, not because it is defeated, but because it is no longer needed. The mind speaks when it believes it must guide you, protect you, correct you, or prepare you. But in this moment, lying in the dark, there is nothing to prepare. There is nothing to solve. There is nothing that can be completed tonight by thinking about it. If a thought tries to begin a story about what happened, about what should have happened, about what might happen, let it remain unfinished. You do not need to follow it to the end. You do not need to see where it leads. A story is only powerful when attention feeds it. Without attention, it becomes a loose thread. It begins and then it simply stops. You might notice a new kind of space between thoughts now, not a dramatic silence, but a softer gap, a small interval where the mind is not commenting, where nothing is being evaluated, where nothing is being compared. It may last only a second or less. That is enough. 1 second is enough. A brief gap is enough because the nervous system recognizes it. The body recognizes it. The whole system understands in a quiet and wordless way that it is safe to pause. And then the inner voice may return again, but gentler, less sharp, less convincing, more like a habit running on its own. You do not need to push it away. You do not need to welcome it. You can let it pass through as you would let a faint sound pass through the night. It is there and then it is not. If the mind brings up a judgment about you, about how you are, about how you should be, notice that it is only a pattern of language. It is not a verdict. It is not truth. It is not a final statement. It is only a sentence, and a sentence can dissolve. A sentence can fade. A sentence can become quieter and quieter until it is no longer worth following. You may even notice that the mind repeats the same shape of sentence again and again, different words, but the same feeling, a pressure to be better, a pressure to have done more, a pressure to have been different. This pressure can feel intimate, as if it belongs to your identity, but it is often just a familiar groove. The brain runs along the same pathway because it is well worn. Tonight, you do not need to carve a new pathway. You do not need to change anything. You are simply not walking that pathway for a while. You are letting the footsteps stop. And as the footsteps stop, the sound of them stops too. Now let the room become a little wider in your awareness, not by imagining it, but by sensing the simple fact that you are surrounded by space. Space above you, space around you, space beyond the walls. The night itself is space, quiet, open space. The kind of space that does not ask questions. The kind of space that does not demand explanations. In a space like this, the mind's voice can soften naturally because there is nothing to argue against. There is nothing to defend. There is nothing to win. The inner voice loses its opponent, and without an opponent, it becomes less intense. You may notice the face relaxing without a decision being made, the eyes resting behind the lids, the small muscles around the mouth releasing, the tongue resting in the mouth, the throat no longer holding tension. These changes can be very small, and they do not need to be noticed perfectly. They happen whether or not you pay attention to them, because the body is always seeking rest, always leaning toward ease when it is allowed. And now the inner voice may begin to sound more distant, still present but farther away, as if it is speaking from another room, as if it is not trying to pull you into the center of it. You are not inside the voice is inside the night, floating somewhere in the background. If you find yourself listening closely again, you can gently stop listening, not with effort, but with simplicity. Listening is an action, and tonight you can set that action down, the same way you might set down a heavy object you have carried for too long. You do not need to throw it away. You do not need to fix it. You only set it down. And when you set it down, you may notice a subtle relief in the body, the chest softening, the belly releasing, the shoulders sinking a little deeper, not because you forced them to, but because the body responds when it senses less inner tension. Now allow a few breaths to move through without commentary. No naming, no judging, no improvement, just breathing, moving quietly in its own rhythm. The breath does not need to be deep. The breath does not need to be slow. The breath only needs to be allowed. And if words come, let them come. If they leave, let them leave. If the mind grows quiet, let it be quiet. There is nothing you must do with any of it. The night is doing its work. The body is doing its work. Even the mind, in its own way, is doing less and less as it realizes there is nothing to manage right now. You may not feel sleep yet. That is fine. Sleep is not a switch you have to control. Sleep arrives when the system is no longer trying to operate at full volume. And right now, the volume is lowering, the inner voice is lowering, the day is lowering, the need to interpret is lowering. Just keep resting here on the edge of quiet, not trying to enter sleep, but allowing yourself to remain in this softened place where the inner voice no longer needs to be kind because it no longer needs to speak. And as the inner voice continues to lower, something else may begin to fade as well, not all at once, and not because you asked it to. The mind slowly stops reaching backward. It grows less interested in replaying, explaining, or correcting what is already past. The pull of the past weakens, not through effort, but through disuse. When attention no longer feeds it, memory does not insist on being revisited. You may notice that thoughts about earlier moments arrive less clearly now. They feel farther away, less vivid, less complete. A scene may try to form, but it does not finish assembling itself. A memory may begin with a feeling, but the details do not follow. This is not forgetting. This is loosening. The mind is learning that it does not need to hold the past in place in order for the present to continue. The past often appears through language, through phrases like, "Why did this happen? What should I have done? If only things were different." These kinds of sentences depend on energy. They need attention to survive. Without attention, they weaken. Without repetition, they dissolve. Tonight you are not pushing them away. You are simply not giving them the fuel they require. There is nothing to analyze right now. No story needs to be completed. No meaning needs to be extracted. The night does not reward understanding. The night rewards rest. And rest does not come from knowing why things happen the way they did. Rest comes from allowing the mind to stop searching for reasons. You may notice how often the mind tries to justify itself, how it tries to explain feelings, decisions, reactions, as if everything must be accounted for, as if every moment must be defended. But in this quiet space, there is no one asking for explanations, no one demanding coherence, no one keeping track. The need to justify slowly loses its purpose. And when the need for justification fades, the mind becomes simpler, not empty, but simpler, less layered, less burdened. Thoughts still arise, but they do not carry the same narrative weight. They do not insist on context. They do not demand conclusions. They appear, hover briefly, and then pass, leaving no trace behind. You may notice that time itself begins to feel less structured, not divided into before and after, not arranged into sequences. The night does not move forward in a straight line. It spreads out. It opens. It allows moments to exist without being connected to anything else. One moment does not need to lead to another. It can simply be. The body understands this deeply. The body does not live in the past. It lives where sensation is, where contact is, where weight meets support. The body does not ask why it feels the way it feels. It responds, adjusts, and then rests again. It does not argue with yesterday. It does not prepare for tomorrow. It only exists now. As you lie here, you may notice the body becoming heavier, not because it is tired, but because it is no longer holding itself up unnecessarily. Gravity is allowed to do its work. Muscles that were subtly engaged can disengage. The spine can settle. The legs can rest without readiness. The arms can remain still without purpose. And as the body settles, the mind often follows, not through instruction, but through resonance. The mind senses that there is nothing urgent to manage, no timeline to monitor, no outcome to secure. Without urgency, the mind's habit of revisiting the past becomes less compelling. If a memory does surface, you do not need to step inside it. You can let it remain distant, like an image seen through fog. No sharp edges, no demand for interpretation. You do not need to relive it. You do not need to learn from it. It does not need to become anything. The mind may still try to ask why, but the question may feel quieter now, less insistent, less convincing, and you can let the question remain unanswered. Questions do not always need answers. Sometimes they only need space to fade. You may notice longer gaps now, where no clear thought is present. These gaps do not need to be filled. They are not mistakes. They are not lapses. They are signs that the system is beginning to rest. Even a few seconds without narrative can be deeply settling for the nervous system. And if a thought arrives that tries to pull you back into a story, notice how little energy it has. It may appear out of habit, but it does not carry the same force. You are no longer pulled into it automatically. There is a small distance now, a gentle separation, enough space to choose not to follow. The night does not belong to the past. The night does not replay. It does not revise. It does not rehearse. The night simply exists, quietly unfolding moment by moment, and you are allowed to exist with it, without commentary. You may notice that language itself is changing. Sentences feel incomplete. Thoughts trail off. Words lose their urgency. Meaning becomes less important than tone, less important than rhythm. The mind is beginning to rest in the sound of language rather than its content. And when meaning loosens, memory loosens too. The two are closely connected. Without meaning, the past has nothing to anchor itself to. It cannot insist on being remembered in a particular way. It cannot demand attention. It simply fades into the background. There is no need to remember anything right now, no need to hold on to insights, no need to store understanding for later. Sleep does not require preparation. It does not arrive because you have resolved the day. It arrives when the system is no longer asking questions. Allow the present moment to remain undefined, not labeled, not interpreted, just present. Sensation without story, awareness without direction, rest without purpose. If you notice yourself drifting slightly, that is welcome. If you notice yourself returning to awareness, that is welcome too. There is no correct position to hold. You do not need to stay balanced. You do not need to stay awake. The past can rest now. It does not need to be carried into the night. It does not need to be solved before sleep arrives. It can remain unfinished, unexamined, and unspoken. And as the pull of the past continues to soften, the mind becomes quieter still, less interested in reasons, less interested in explanations, less interested in stories, more willing to remain here in this simple, wordless place where nothing is required. Just rest here for a while longer. The night is wide enough to hold you without history. And now, without announcing it, language itself may begin to change its role. Words are still present, still arriving in the mind, still being heard, but they no longer need to explain anything. They no longer need to point anywhere. They no longer need to carry meaning forward. They begin to exist simply as sound, as rhythm, as something that passes through awareness without asking to be held. You may notice that you are no longer listening closely. The effort to understand has softened. The need to follow each sentence from beginning to end has relaxed. This is not a loss of attention. It is a different kind of attention, one that does not grasp, one that does not analyze, one that allows language to move the way music moves without asking what it means. Words can be like this. They do not always need to function as instructions or explanations. Sometimes they are simply vibrations shaped by breath, carried by tone. When the mind no longer tries to use them to think, they become gentler, less sharp, less demanding. They begin to fade into the background of awareness, like a familiar sound that no longer needs to be identified. You may notice that sentences feel slower now, not because the voice has changed speed, but because there is no urgency to reach the end of them. The mind does not rush ahead. It does not try to anticipate what comes next. Each phrase can arrive, rest for a moment, and then dissolve on its own. There is nothing you need to remember, from what is being said. Nothing you need to store, nothing you need to carry with you. The words are not instructions, they are not guidance, they are not lessons, they are simply present and then gone. You may notice longer spaces between thoughts now, not empty spaces that need filling, but open spaces that feel neutral, even comfortable. In these spaces, the mind does not comment, it does not label, it does not compare. It simply rests briefly before another sound or sensation passes through. If a word catches your attention for a moment, that is fine. You do not need to hold on to it. You do not need to follow where it leads. It can drift away as easily as it arrived. Attention can loosen its grip without effort. The body often responds to this change quietly. Muscles soften a little more. The breath becomes slightly deeper or slightly slower without any decision being made. The weight of the body is more clearly supported. The surface beneath you feels steady, reliable, without needing to be checked. You may notice the boundary between listening and resting becoming less clear. You are not fully listening and you are not fully asleep. You are somewhere in between. This in-between place does not need to be defined. It is enough to remain here without trying to move in either direction. Language continues, but it no longer leads. It no longer sets the pace. It no longer demands understanding. It simply accompanies the process of settling, like a gentle presence that does not interfere. You may notice that meaning itself has become optional. A sentence can pass through awareness without forming a clear idea. Words can be heard without becoming thoughts. This is not confusion, it is rest. The mind does not need to assemble meaning in order to be safe. If you drift away for a few moments and then return, that is natural. If you drift further and do not return for a while, that is natural too. There is no need to monitor where you are. There is no need to check whether sleep is approaching. Sleep does not need to be invited. It arrives when the conditions are right, and those conditions are forming on their own. The sound of language may now feel more distant, as if it is coming from farther away, not because it is moved, but because attention has softened. The edges of awareness blur slightly. The distinction between inside and outside becomes less important. You may notice that thoughts no longer arrive as complete sentences. They appear as fragments, as impressions, as faint movements that do not fully form, and even these begin to slow, begin to thin, begin to space themselves out. There is no need to guide this process, no need to encourage it, no need to hold it in place. It unfolds on its own when nothing interferes. The night supports this deeply. Darkness removes visual demands. Stillness reduces stimulation. The body senses that it is safe to let go. And when the body lets go, the mind follows, step by step, without being told. Words are no longer working hard. They are no longer trying to do something for you. They are simply present, lightly touching awareness, then fading. Their role is ending quietly, without ceremony. You may notice that even the sense of time has become vague. Minutes are not being counted. Progress is not being tracked. There is no sense of moving forward, only of settling downward, gently, into rest. Allow this to continue without naming it, without interpreting it, without asking what it means. The mind does not need to know what stage it is in. The body does not need confirmation. Everything is already happening as it should. If you hear the voice as sound only now, that is enough. If you hear nothing at all for a while, that is enough too. There is no requirement to stay connected to the words. They can come and go freely, and as they do, the space they leave behind becomes more noticeable, wider, quieter, more stable, a space that does not need filling, a space that does not ask for attention. Rest here in this gentle transition where words are no longer necessary and silence does not need to be explained. And now the voice you hear may begin to feel less like a guide and more like a distant presence, not leading, not directing, simply existing for a moment and then passing. The words do not ask to be followed. They do not ask to be remembered. They are no longer doing work. They are only arriving softly and then dissolving into the quiet that surrounds them. You may notice that attention no longer stays with each phrase. It drifts naturally, without effort. Sometimes it rests with the sound of the voice. Sometimes it rests with the breath. Sometimes it rests nowhere in particular. This drifting is not a problem. It is a sign that the mind no longer needs to hold itself upright. The body understands this shift. It responds by settling more completely. Weight sinks, contact deepens. The surface beneath you feels steady without needing to be checked. There is no need to adjust, no need to find a better position. The body has already found what it needs. Breathing continues quietly without being observed. The breath does not need attention anymore. It does not need naming. It does not need improvement. It simply moves in and out, carrying the body gently toward rest. The voice continues for a while, but it no longer carries importance. It no longer asks for understanding. It is like a sound heard through a wall, present but distant, familiar but not engaging. The mind does not reach for it. The mind does not push it away. It is allowed to be there and allowed to fade. You may notice longer stretches now where nothing is being said inside, not silence that needs to be protected, but silence that arrives naturally when there is nothing left to comment on. These stretches may pass unnoticed. That is fine. Silence does not need recognition. If thoughts appear, they do so lightly. They do not form stories. They do not demand conclusions. They arise, hover briefly, and then disappear like small ripples that flatten themselves without effort. There is no need to stay awake for this. There is no need to listen carefully. There is no need to notice what comes next. The system no longer needs guidance. It knows how to continue on its own. The sound of the voice may now feel farther away, as if it is receding, not because it is leaving, but because attention is resting elsewhere. The edges of awareness soften. The boundary between listening and sleeping becomes less distinct. You may drift, you may return, you may drift again. There is no pattern you need to follow. The night allows movement without direction. It allows rest without permission. Nothing important will be missed. Nothing needs to be held on to. The words are not carrying information. They are simply marking time gently until even that is no longer necessary. And soon, the voice itself no longer needs to continue. It has done enough. It has accompanied you to this quiet threshold where language is no longer required. From here, sound can remain without words, tone without meaning, rhythm without instruction, presence without effort. There is no moment where this must be noticed, no signal that says something has changed. The transition happens quietly, without announcement, the way sleep arrives when no one is watching. If you are still aware, you can let awareness rest. If you are already drifting, you can continue drifting. Nothing needs to be decided. Nothing needs to be completed. Just this soft continuation into sound where the voice fades and only gentle vibration remains. There is no need to move from here. Nothing is waiting on the other side of this moment. Nothing needs to begin and nothing needs to end. The quiet you are resting in does not lead anywhere. It simply continues gently without direction. You may notice that awareness itself feels different now, less focused, less interested in holding a single point. It spreads out the way darkness spreads when the lights are off, not rushing, not claiming space, just present everywhere at once. The body is already doing what it knows how to do. It is sinking where it can, releasing where it no longer needs to hold. Even small efforts, the kind you do not usually notice, can begin to soften. The effort to listen, the effort to stay aware, the effort to remain here, all of that can loosen now. Breathing continues somewhere in the background. You do not need to be with it. You do not need to follow it. It moves on its own, as it always has, steady and quiet. If the voice is still faintly present, it does not matter. If it has already disappeared, that does not matter either. There is no preferred state here, nothing you need to reach. The night is not asking for attention. It does not require participation. It allows you to rest inside it without effort, without identity. You may notice the sense of you becoming softer, not gone, just less defined, less central. Thoughts do not arrange themselves around it anymore. Sensations do not report back to it. Everything simply exists. The room around you does not need to be imagined. It does not need to be mapped. It holds you whether or not you think about it. The same is true of the night beyond the room, wide, uninterested in explanation. Time may feel different now, not slower, not faster, just less noticeable. Moments do not stack up. They dissolve as they arrive. If awareness drifts, let it drift. If it pauses, let it pause. There is no need to return to anything. The mind no longer needs language to stay oriented. It no longer needs meaning to feel safe. Sound alone is enough. Presence alone is enough. You do not need to remember being here. You do not need to carry this quiet forward. The body will remember it in its own way. Soon, even the sense of listening may soften. Hearing becomes less precise. Edges blur. Sound blends into silence, and silence blends into rest. Nothing marks this transition. There is no clear line where one state ends and another begins. That is how rest works. It arrives without announcement. You can let yourself remain exactly as you are. not trying to sleep, not trying to stay awake, just resting in the space where nothing is required. And as this continues, sound can remain without voice, vibration without words, a steady presence that does not ask anything of you. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to listen for, nothing left to follow. Just this gentle continuation where awareness thins and rest deepens on its own. There is still nothing you need to do, and there is no reason to move away from this moment, because this moment is not a place you arrived at, and it is not a place you will leave. It is simply the absence of movement, the absence of demand, the absence of any need to orient yourself towards something else. Awareness can remain loose here, unfocused, unconcerned with direction, unconcerned with progress, unconcerned with meaning. You may notice that even the sense of listening has softened, not disappeared, but loosened, as if sound no longer needs to be received clearly in order to be allowed. Hearing can happen without effort, without attention, without interpretation. Sound arrives, passes through, and leaves no trace behind it. There is no need to follow where it goes. There is no need to notice that it has gone. The body continues to rest in its own quiet intelligence. Weight remains supported. Muscles remain released where they can be released. Even areas that still hold a little tension are allowed to hold it without correction, without judgment, without the suggestion that something should be different. The body does not rush toward sleep. It moves toward it gradually, indirectly, often without realizing it has begun. Breathing continues somewhere in the background of awareness, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, sometimes noticed, sometimes not. It does not matter where it is. It does not matter how it feels. The breath does not need to cooperate with rest. Rest happens alongside it, quietly, without instruction. Thoughts may still appear from time to time, but they are no longer shaped like conversations. They do not ask questions. They do not seek answers. They arrive as fragments, as impressions, as faint movements that dissolve before they can form into anything solid. Even the idea of thinking begins to lose its meaning here. What remains is a gentle mental activity that no longer organizes itself into language. You may notice that the sense of being someone, of being a person with a story, a past, a future, has softened as well. Not erased, not denied, simply less present. The night does not require an identity. It does not require continuity. It does not require memory. It allows experience to exist without being attached to a name, a role, or a narrative. Time becomes less noticeable in this state, not slower, not faster, but less relevant. There is no internal clock asking how long this has been happening or how long it will last. Moments do not accumulate. They dissolve as they appear, leaving no pressure behind them. The sense of waiting disappears because there is nothing being waited for. If awareness drifts towards sleep, it can drift without resistance. If it hovers on the edge of sleep, it can hover without effort. There is no need to cross a threshold deliberately. Sleep does not respond to intention. It responds to the absence of interference. And here, interference has already softened, already thinned, already begun to fade. The mind no longer needs to manage itself. It no longer needs to monitor its state. It no longer needs to check whether rest is happening correctly. These habits fall away naturally when they are no longer useful. Nothing replaces them. There is no new task. There is simply less doing. Sound may remain present, but it no longer stands out against silence. The difference between sound and silence becomes less important. They blend into one another, creating a steady, neutral background that does not pull attention in any direction. Sound does not interrupt rest. Silence does not demand it. Both are allowed. You may notice that even the idea of here has softened. There is no strong sense of location. The body is supported, but not located. Awareness is present, but not positioned. The room exists, but it does not need to be imagined. Space holds everything without asking to be recognized. Nothing in this state needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be carried forward. There is no lesson hidden here. There is no insight you are meant to keep. This quiet does not belong to you. It does not need to be owned or preserved. It will return on its own whenever conditions allow. And as this continues, the system naturally moves toward deeper rest, not through collapse, not through force, but through gradual withdrawal from effort. The smallest efforts fall away first. The effort to listen, the effort to notice, the effort to remain aware. What remains is simply being without orientation. You can let this continue for as long as it continues. There is no endpoint you need to reach, no signal you need to wait for. The transition into sleep does not announce itself. It happens in the same quiet way this rest has been happening all along. Nothing changes, and yet everything settles. You do not need to stay with these words any longer. They do not need your attention now. They have already done enough. From here, nothing more needs to be said. Nothing needs to be understood. Nothing needs to be remembered. Sound can remain on its own, not as language, not as meaning, only as presence. You do not need to listen. You do not need to follow. Simply allow the sound to continue the same way the night continues. There is nothing else you need to do. Sometimes peace is not something we must learn. It is something we remember. The world pulls us outward, toward goals, toward noise, toward endless motion. But when the heart grows quiet, we begin to sense a deeper rhythm beneath it all, a rhythm that has always been waiting, softly calling us home. This quiet home lives inside you, but it can be easy to forget. That is why Gassho exists, not to add anything new, but to help you return. A space built for stillness, for reflection, for the gentle work of being. In its name, Gassho, there is a gesture, two hands meeting in respect and gratitude, a gesture of unity between self and world, between heart and breath, between sound and silence. When you open the Gassho app, you are not entering another screen. You are stepping into a small temple that travels with you, a place where you can sit without expectation, breathe without demand, and listen without effort. Inside you will find guided meditations, stories inspired by Buddhist wisdom, and the steady presence of sutras, not as lessons, but as companions. The sound you are about to hear is one of those companions, a sound carried through generations, a sound shaped by breath, devotion, and time. You do not need to understand the words. You do not need to follow the rhythm. You do not need to stay awake for it. Let the sound arrive as it is. Let it move through awareness without resistance. Let it remain even as attention fades. There is nothing left to do, only to rest. Let the breath settle. Let the body sink, and simply listen. The sound of the sutra continues, offered from a temple in the quiet mountains of Koya-san, shared here through the Gassho app whenever you wish to return to silence.
称